Last season was a season of firsts for Chelsea in the era of their current owners. Most importantly, they finished 4th in the Premier League, their highest finish under Bluco, which guarantees them a place in the Champions League. But on top of this, Chelsea were able to retain the services of their head coach Enzo Maresca, giving them a level of stability through the summer and into the next campaign that they've never had under Bluco. Now, both of these factors put the club into a good position going into the transfer window. But anyone who has paid any attention to Chelsea over the last 3 seasons will know that it isn't quite that simple, because no other club in the world has quite the same idea of what a sensible transfer looks like. That's right, this is Sensible Transfers, where we look for weaknesses in squads and identify solutions to those problems. Remember, this is not what we think the clubs will do, it's what we think they should do. Now, in this video, we're going to take a look at some areas where Chelsea can improve their squad, but before we get to that, we need to have a think about how they approach squad building. Because when you list all of the players available to their first team squad right now, it looks something like this. Of course, the eventual squad will look much smaller than this, but whittling it down is going to require a lot of work from Chelsea's decision makers. So why did Chelsea have so many players on their books? Well, in the words of Todd Bowley, one of the co-owners of the club, we're trying to build the best portfolio of players that can perform at the highest level for the longest period of time. In other words, Chelsea are looking to develop a conveyor belt of young talent, investing more than anyone else in youngsters, developing them, and then either retaining them or selling them on for profit. The problem is, you can only develop players on a football pitch, and you can only play so many players at any one time. With too big a squad of players, you're going to have to leave some players out, and that will mean devaluing them. The solution for Chelsea then is to be constantly moving players around to keep the squad manageable, and that means either selling players or loaning them out. So the first sensible transfers that Chelsea need to think about this summer are their own outgoings. So let's go back to our squad list and start making it a little bit more manageable. We'll begin with the players who could be sold on. Now, there are a couple of problems when it comes to selling players. Not only are Chelsea reliant on other teams taking players off them, but some of these players could be hard to shift. For example, players like Raheem Sterling or Joao Felix will be on high wages, which means a lot of teams won't be able to afford them. Another solution to the big squad problem is to loan players out. So let's identify the players who could make even more space in the squad then. So that leaves us with this. Now, it's worth noting at the outset that with Champions League football next season, Maresca won't be able to offer the same kind of minutes that he gave his youngsters in the Conference League last season. So Maresca might have to use the loan market to give some of these players regular football. But loaning players out might not be as easy as it once was either, with FIFA making the rules around international loans more strict. Of course, issues with selling and loaning players affect all clubs, not just Chelsea. But Chelsea's model is so dependent on easily shifting players in and out of the club that it affects them more than others. For example, if they can't move Sterling on, then it may mean one less player somewhere else in their squad, and that means potentially that player loses value. Let's imagine though that Chelsea have the perfect summer and manage to shift all the players that I've suggested they should. We'd end up with a squad that looks something like this. As you can see, they've already been addressing some areas of potential weakness in the market. The striker area was clearly a focus of attention for them because they've not only triggered Liam Delap's release clause and brought him into the club, they've also shown interest in Ugo Ekitike at Eintracht Frankfurt. The other obvious weak spot in their starting 11 last season was in the left wing position, with Mykhailo Mudrik's suspension leaving them short, which became a bigger problem when they realised that Pedro Neto probably suited the right-hand side better than the left. On top of this, the club opted out of the obligation to buy on Jadon Sancho, which effectively left them without a starting level left winger. To offset this, they recently submitted a proposal to sign Jamie Gittens from Borussia Dortmund, with Alejandro Garnacho of Manchester United another option under consideration. And despite having a number of goalkeeper options, Chelsea still find themselves in a situation where they haven't adequately replaced Thibaut Courtois, who left in 2018. So it's no surprise that they've shown interest in AC Milan's Mike Maignan this window. Finally, the squad will be boosted by a number of players who signed in the last 12 months who will join them this summer. Most prominently, Esteval-Willian will add depth on the right-hand side, playing as a winger or maybe as a backup to Cole Palmer, while Andre Santos and Dario Isugo will fill out the midfield. Even with all this summer activity though, there is still a clear area of weakness in the squad: the left-back spot. Of course, Chelsea could run Marc Cucurella with Renato Vega or Ben Chilwell as backup, but they loaned out both players in the second half of last season, so it looks as though they'll try and move them on if possible. They do also have an exciting young prospect in the form of Isha Samuel-Smith, who they could develop in the position, but they would probably prefer to keep him in the academy or loan him out to guarantee more minutes. This means they could bring in a player to add more depth if they wanted to, but the question is, Who should they sign? From a tactical point of view, the left-back role is quite an interesting one, because Maresca likes to invert his right-back into the midfield area, and then use his left-back quite flexibly to achieve a number of different things. At times sitting them a little bit deeper, almost like an outside centre-back, using them inverted, but also pushing them high up the pitch to offer a rotation option with the winger. Cucurella fits this role quite well because he can play in these tighter spaces inside the pitch, but also offers a really nice overlapping option in the final third. But he does lack some of the qualities required to be a really good outside centre-back, especially on the defensive side, where he has a tendency to jump aggressively into tackles to make up for an inability to cover wide open spaces, particularly in transition. As a result, Chelsea could look for a player who excels more on the defensive side of the left-back role, which is presumably why they've been considering Everton's Jared Branthwaite. Not only could Branthwaite be used as a more defensive option at left-back who shifted inside when the right-back inverted, but he could also offer cover for Levi Colwill as well. However, despite the fact that Branthwaite would fulfil the requirements for the outside centre-back part of the role, he wouldn't be able to offer some of the things that Maresca might want further up the pitch, which means a sensible option might be to find a player who could do both. There are a couple of other options on the market right now who do fit this kind of role. Jorrel Hato has been used as a left-back and a left-sided centre-back by Ajax over the last couple of seasons, making him a perfect candidate. He probably suits the centre-back role slightly better, even though he can carry the ball forward and operate inside, but his reliance on his left foot can reduce his effectiveness in these tight spaces at times. His contract also runs out in 2028, which means he wouldn't come cheap, effectively pricing him out as a sensible transfer option. Piero Hincapié at Bayer Leverkusen is a similar profile to Hato, but he actually has an extra year on his contract, which means he'll be in a similar situation from a financial point of view. Perhaps a more affordable option will be Archie Brown, who plays in this left-back becoming an outside centre-back role for Ghent in Belgium. Born in England but moving abroad very young, Brown is basically the perfect candidate for what Chelsea are looking for from a defensive point of view. He also has a contract that runs out in 2027 and would be a more affordable option coming from the Belgian league. However, there would be questions about how well he would step up to the Premier League, and he would have to be considered as a development option, and, well, Chelsea have already got loads of those. Which is why my sensible transfer pick for Chelsea's left-back role is Theo Hernandez of AC Milan. For most of his career, Hernandez has operated as a traditional fullback, getting high up the pitch, and then rotating inside or outside depending on the position of the winger. So here you can see him operating on the inside with Rafael Leao as the outside option, and then later in the game you can see the roles are reversed, with Hernandez now holding the outside position. However, in the 23-24 season, Hernandez picked up around 1,000 minutes as an outside centre-back, where he has the athleticism to defend large spaces, especially in the wide channels. This would make him a good rotation option with Marc Cucurella and give Enzo Maresca a degree of tactical flexibility in a season where he'll be expected to run teams in 4 competitions. The real sticker here though is that Hernandez is on a 2026 contract, which means he'll be available for a really nice fee, making this my sensible transfer pick. Now, at this point in the video, I'm supposed to pick a smaller problem that Chelsea can then fix, but I'm going to do something a little bit unprecedented here. I'm going to suggest that the most sensible transfer at this point is no transfer at all. Let me explain why. If we go back to the board, there are still some areas of weakness where Chelsea could improve. For example, at right centre-back, their starting option is Wesley Fofana, who's actually missed 112 games for the club through injury, far more than the 34 appearances he's actually made. Now, clearly there is a possibility here of finding a replacement for Fofana who offers a better rate of return on appearances. But to do that, not only would they have to move Fofana on, which would be very difficult given his injury history, they would also be closing a possible development route for Mamadou Sarr, who they've just brought in from Strasbourg. So the sensible thing to do would be to not sign anyone and let the youngster develop. Then there's the number 10 spot, or the right hand 8 spot, depending on how you look at it. Again, you could make the case that if Joao Felix is sold or loaned out, you could bring in a specialist who could offer backup to Cole Palmer. However, this potentially blocks the development route of Estevão, who's going to have to find minutes across the right wing spot or the 10 spot if he's going to develop. And thinking longer term, this could also impact the development of Kendry Páez, who Chelsea are likely to send to Strasbourg this season. So once again, the sensible transfer here is no transfer. So this is my sensible transfer pick. And this is how Chelsea would look like after the summer if I was in charge. JJ is up next with his sensible picks for Arsenal, but if you can't wait until then for your transfer fix, why not check out the deal sheet on the Athletics website, or watch the Athletics Week in Football, where we've got deal sheet shows running throughout the summer. Bye!
If you like this video, please consider subscribing to the channel. The Athletic is home to some of the world's best sports journalists, including David Ornstein, Amy Lawrence and James Horncastle. With the latest transfer news and insights on every Premier League story that matters, theathletic.com puts you inside football, and you can try it for free now for 30 days. See the link in the description.